The wind howled across the desolate, snow-blasted ridgeline like a living thing, hungry and mean. For 48 hours, a relentless blizzard had turned the Hindu Kush Mountains into a white hell, erasing the horizon and burying the already treacherous terrain under several feet of fresh powder. The temperature had plummeted well below zero, and the wind chill made it feel like another planet entirely. Cold enough to freeze flesh in minutes, to turn breath into ice crystals that hung in the air, and then vanished into the swirling void. Somewhere out in that frozen chaos, a 6-man Navy SEAL team was down. Their mission, a high-altitude reconnaissance deep in the Shock Valley, had gone sideways in the worst possible way. Inserted by helicopter just before the storm hit, and they had been compromised by a group of goat herders and were soon cornered by a much larger force of well-armed insurgents. The ensuing firefight had been brutal and chaotic. In the initial moments of the ambush, a rocket-propelled grenade had struck the team's communications operator, killing him instantly and destroying their long-range radio. Now, they were cut off, their extraction impossible in the whiteout conditions, and they were fighting for their lives against an enemy that knew every cave, every crevice, and every hidden pass of their ancestral home. The only person who knew they were in trouble was a solitary figure watching the storm from a forward operating base, FOB, dozens of miles away. Her name was Sergeant First Class Kaya Chen, and she was, by any measure, an anomaly, a sniper with 1st Battalion. A 5th Special Forces group, the legendary Legion. Kaya was the only female special operations soldier in her entire brigade. She was a slight woman with sharp, angular features that looked like they were carved from the same stone as the mountains she now studied. Her dark eyes, framed by a thick tangle of black hair pulled back from her face, held a disconcerting stillness, a patience that seemed almost geological in its scale. She didn't just look at the mountain range on the horizon. She felt it, reading its contours and shadows the way a conductor reads a score. The intelligence report was fragmentary, a desperate, staticky burst of satellite communication picked up just as the SEALs went dark. Element under heavy contact, multiple casualties, need immediate extraction, grid coordinates follow. The transmission ended abruptly. The coordinates placed the team on a steep, exposed slope near the peak of a mountain simply designated Objective Liberty. With the storm raging, no aircraft could fly. The only way to reach them, to even confirm they were still alive, was on foot. The FOB's commanding officer, a grizzled infantry colonel, had already written the SEALs off. It was a brutal calculus, but one dictated by the unforgiving environment. "No one is going up there in this," he had stated flatly, gesturing at the radar screen showing a massive, immovable wall of precipitation. "We'd lose a platoon and never find a single body. We wait for the storm to break." But Kaya couldn't wait. In the special operations community, the bond was tribal. The lines between units, SEALs, Green Berets, Rangers, were often blurred in the field. They were all brothers, all part of a smaller, tighter family forged in the same fires. The thought of 6 men, maybe dead, maybe wounded, freezing to death alone on a mountain while the living safe in the FOB was an obscenity she couldn't stomach. She had spent the last 6 hours in the intelligence tent, poring over satellite imagery from just before the storm, topographic maps, and weather reports. She memorized the approach to Objective Liberty, noting a possible leeward ridge that might offer some shelter from the worst of the wind. She calculated distances, elevation gains, and estimated her rate of travel in waist-deep snow. It was a fool's errand, a solo climb in a whiteout against an enemy she couldn't see, to save men she'd never met. But Kaya Chen wasn't motivated by logic. She was motivated by a singular and unshakable principle. You don't leave your people behind. As the colonel gave the order to stand down, Kaya was already in her hooch, suiting up. She layered merino wool against her skin, then a thermal fleece, and finally her white-over-white ghillie suit, a shapeless smock of ragged fabric designed to break up her outline and blend into snow and rock. She checked her weapon, an M24 sniper weapon system chambered in .308, its scope capped, and its stock wrapped in white tape. She packed extra ammunition, high-calorie energy bars, a small stove to melt snow for water, and a compact emergency medical kit. She didn't take a radio. In this weather it was useless, and its weight was better spent on ammunition. She left a note on her bunk, 3 simple words: "Gone to help." Then, as the FOB hunkered down against the storm, Kaya Chen slipped through a gap in the perimeter wire and vanished into the screaming whiteness. The snow immediately swallowed her. Within 50 feet, the base was gone, erased from existence as if it had never been. There was only the wind, the cold, and the brutal, crushing silence of the mountain. She was utterly, terrifyingly alone. The only sounds were the crunch of her snowshoes punching through the crust and the rasp of her own breath inside her balaclava, a small rhythmic defiance against the vast, indifferent roar of the blizzard. This was the first step into a frozen nightmare, a 48-hour ordeal that would test the very limits of human endurance. She was a ghost, walking into the heart of the storm, chasing a desperate hope that she wasn't already too late. The first 12 hours were a battle against the mountain itself. Kaya moved at a painstakingly slow, methodical pace. Each step was a conscious effort. She would plant her trekking pole, test the snow's stability, then shift her weight, sinking only to her knees before pulling her other leg forward. It was a form of meditation, a way to quiet the mind and focus solely on the next step, and the next, and the next. To think about the cold, the distance, the impossible odds was to invite despair. So she didn't think. She just moved. By nightfall, she had gained perhaps 2,000 feet in elevation. The wind here was even more ferocious, tearing at her ghillie suit and threatening to knock her off balance. She found a slight overhang of rock, a shallow indentation in the mountain's face, and curled up inside it. She didn't dare sleep, and to sleep in these conditions was to die. She huddled in her survival bivvy, a lightweight, waterproof sack, and forced herself to eat frozen chunks of energy bar, melting them in her mouth before swallowing. She shivered uncontrollably for hours, her body's desperate attempt to generate heat. She thought of the seals. Were they shivering too? Or had they already stopped? As the first gray light of dawn filtered through the storm, a slightly less dark shade of gray, she was moving again. The storm showed no signs of abating. If anything, it seemed to have intensified, the wind whipping the snow into a ground blizzard that reduced visibility to 0. She was navigating purely by terrain association and the GPS unit she kept tucked in an inside pocket, its battery life a precious dwindling resource. Around midday, she found the first sign of the seals. It was a patch of blood-spattered snow, already partially drifted over. A few feet away, lying half-buried, was a shredded piece of camouflage fabric and an empty magazine for an M4 carbine. The scene told a grim story. This is where the initial ambush had happened. This is where they had made their last stand before being forced to move. Kaya's blood ran cold, a sensation that had nothing to do with the temperature. She scanned the area, her sniper's eye looking for anything out of place. Then she saw it, a drag mark, barely visible, leading away from the blood and around a massive boulder. She followed it, her heart pounding against her ribs. The trail led to a small, ice-encrusted crevice in the rock face. barely wide enough for a man to squeeze through. And from its depths, she heard it. A guttural moan, barely audible above the wind. She approached cautiously, weapon up, and peered into the gloom. It took a moment for her eyes to adjust. A man was wedged inside the crevice, lying on his side. His face was a mask of frozen blood, his lips a terrifying shade of blue-gray. He was wearing the remnants of a SEAL uniform, his right leg twisted at a grotesque angle below the knee. He was alive, but only just. He was the team's medic, left here by his teammates, too badly injured to move, with a promise that they would come back. They had given him their last chemical heat packs, their last water, and had gone on, hoping to find a better defensive position to draw the enemy away from him. They had been gone for nearly a full day. The man's eyes fluttered open as Kaya's shadow fell over him. They were unfocused, glazed with pain and the creeping fog of hypothermia. He tried to speak, but only a rasping whisper came out. Who's there?" he croaked, his hand twitching weakly toward a pistol lying by his side. Kaya leaned in close, pulling down her frozen balaclava so he could see her face. "It's okay," she said, her voice firm and calm, a rock of certainty in the howling chaos. "I'm here to help. I'm Sergeant Chen, 5th Group. I'm going to get you out of here." The man stared at her, a flicker of confusion, then disbelief, crossing his face. A lone woman, appearing out of a blizzard on a mountaintop in Afghanistan. It was so improbable, so impossible, that he must have thought he was already dead and dreaming. But the cold was real, and the hand that pressed a warm canteen to his lips was real. For the first time in over 30 hours, the Senior Chief Petty Officer Marcus Thorne, United States Navy SEAL, allowed himself to hope. The first part of the rescue was the most delicate, keeping Thorne alive. He was deep in the throes of hypothermia and shock from his compound leg fracture. Kaya knew that moving him aggressively could send his already stressed heart into a fatal arrhythmia, so she worked quickly but gently. She used her emergency blanket to create a windbreak at the mouth of the crevice, trapping some of their collective body heat. She lit her small stove inside the tiny space, carefully monitoring the carbon monoxide risk, and began melting snow to make warm, sugary water. She trickled it into his mouth, slowly, patiently, bringing his core temperature up by fractions of a degree. She then turned to his leg. She wasn't a medic, but she had basic trauma training. Using a splint from her kit and strips of webbing cut from her pack, she immobilized the fracture as best she could. The bone wasn't protruding through the skin, which was a small mercy, but the swelling was severe. She gave him the last of her ibuprofen and one of her precious doses of morphine, knowing the pain would only get worse. All the while, she questioned him. Who's left? How many? Where were they heading? Thorne, drifting in and out of consciousness, could only give her fragments. 6. Started with 6. Johnson is gone. Commander Reed. Heading for the peak, wanted high ground, enemy all around us, so many. The picture solidified in her mind. The team leader, a commander named Reed, had made the tactical decision to leave his most severely wounded man in a hidden spot and push for the summit with the remaining 4. It was a classic military maneuver. Seize the high ground to control the battlefield and wait for extraction. But in this storm, extraction wasn't coming. They were sitting ducks. They had traded one kill box for another. Kaya had a terrible choice to make. She could stay here with Thorne, try to keep him alive, and hope that the SEALs on the peak would survive long enough for the storm to break and a rescue team to reach them. Or she could leave Thorne alone again with a promise to return and try to find the rest of the team. It was a gamble either way. If she left and got lost or killed, Thorne would die here, alone,